Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at the story of a really unique place, often called the smallest city in the world.
That's right.
We've got some great sources you provided for this deep dive, a mix of historical accounts tracing its journey and a modern tourist guide showing what it's like now.
And our mission here really is to unpack that history, understand the title, see how it changed, what it offers today, but strictly based on the material you gave us.
Okay.
And what really comes through is this blend, this fascinating blend of historical resilience and, modern adaptation.
Okay, let's dive right in then. We're talking about Durbuy in Belgium. And this whole smallest city in the world idea, it's such a hook. Where does that actually come from, based on the history source?
Well, that title, smallest city, the historical source explains it goes back to 1331. There was a charter granted by John I of Bohemia, and that was the official act. That's what made Durbuy a city, gave it that status. And what's really interesting is that designation, it's stuck right up to today. Doesn't matter about population size compared to other places.
It's the history.
It's all about that historical legacy, yeah.
So it's that official piece of paper from centuries ago, not how big it is now.
Mm-hmm.
But the sources, they trace its origins much, much further back than 1331.
Oh, much further, yeah. The history goes way back, early Middle Ages. First time it shows up in writing, according to the sources, is as Durbuy in 814 AD.
Wow.
814.
So yeah, over 1,000 years before it even got that city charter.
Deep roots, indeed. And the sources really stress its location, absolutely crucial, right there on the Arth River. How did that shape its early days, its identity?
The art was, it was basically everything back then.
Yeah.
The history source describes it as this vital commercial route, like an overhighway, connecting different regions.
So Durbuy became this natural crossroads, a key spot for trade. We're talking grain, timber, stone, essential stuff moving through. It just drew in merchants, artisans.
So not just a random spot, it was positioned for business.
Precisely. It grew into a pretty significant medieval commercial center. The sources mention fortified walls, a castle overlooking the river, signs of its importance, its strategic value, and you also had nearby monastic communities, farming the land, supporting the local economy. But the sources are clear, it never became this massive city like a metropolis.
Right.
But its constant presence, its role as this regional hub, even just a minor administrative one, that really built the foundation for its identity, the one that's lasted.
And it sounds like that identity got tested a lot.
Yeah.
The sources talk about fortunes rising and falling. What were some of the big challenges, the shifts it faced after getting that city status? This is where it gets really interesting.
It really does. So after 1331, under feudal lords, the sources show it kind of flourishing for a while. They invested in things. Like in 1372, its defenses were strengthened.
Okay.
One source connects that to tensions around the 100 Years' War period, even though Durbuy itself mostly avoided the big battles.
Makes sense. Better safe than sorry.
Right. And the local economy was doing well. Guilds, weavers, tanners, millers, often using water mills on the river. The Arth was still that lifeline for trade.
And then bigger powers get involved.
Exactly. Early modern era, mid-16th century, it comes under the Spanish Habsburgs. And the sources you sent detail the impact. Higher taxes, having to billet mercenary troops, the tercios.
Those are the Spanish infantry units, right? Must have been tough on the locals.
Yeah, definitely strained resources. And while Durbuy wasn't getting besieged like, say, Dinant or Namur nearby during the Dutch Revolt.
Which were hit hard, apparently.
Repeatedly. But Durbuy became a haven for refugees fleeing the fighting, so its population actually swelled temporarily.
A place of refuge then, in all that chaos.
Yes, and the local nobility, the House of Ursel, they were key. They managed to negotiate a degree of autonomy with the Spanish governors, which helped Durbuy cope.
Navigating the politics.
Pretty much. Then the sources note things calming down after the Peace of Westphalia in 1648. That treaty ended the big religious wars in Europe. Markets reopened, trade started flowing again.
And into breathing room.
And you see some renewal, architecture, art, mentions of Baroque churches, a Renaissance wing added to the chateau.
It sounds like this cycle challenge, adaptation, recovery, investment, that's a constant theme in the history we have here. But even in calmer times, the sources mention ongoing issues like taxes causing unrest.
Oh, absolutely. That pressure on ordinary people was real. Peasant revolts happened in the region. But alongside that, you still see civic improvements mentioned in the sources, like restoring the Pont de Granville Bridge, widening the Rue de Récollet. It regained vicality, but within that sort of hierarchical society of the time.
Okay, moving into the 18th century. The sources suggest its old strategic importance, the fortified town thing, started to fade a bit, especially next to places like Liège or Charleroi that were industrializing.
Yeah.
How did Derby stay relevant?
Well, it kept its economic footing through its agricultural hinterland and its artisan production, a more traditional economy, really. And the sources again point to the Ursel family. They became central from 1756.
Still playing a big role then.
Huge. They weren't just landowners. They renovated the chateau, again, classical style gardens, and used it for intellectual salons. So Derby became this small kind of cultural hub.
Interesting shift.
Yeah.
From military outpost to cultural spot.
It added that layer, yeah. Now, the big new transport networks, like canals, they mostly bypassed Derby. But local roads did get improved for carriages, which helped support seasonal fairs. And the sources also show the local government, the mayoralty taking on more civic duties, public health stuff, trying to combat dysentery, smallpox, and parish registers started appearing, giving us demographic data.
And then boom.
Yeah.
French Revolution. Napoleon.
Right, big upheaval. French revolutionary armies arrive in 1794. Derby gets absorbed into this new French administrative area, the Department of Orthe, which brought changes, strains. Napoleonic policies like conscription hit families hard. After Napoleon's defeat, the sources track it being assigned first to the United Kingdom of the Netherlands after 1815, which then led to Belgian independence in 1830.
Okay, Belgian independence, that's a massive shift. So what did this all mean for Derby, for its identity, its place in this new country?
Well, independence brought big administrative changes. The sources note the reshuffle in 1839 placed Derby firmly in the province of Luxembourg.
Not just lines on a map, I guess.
No, it also meant official recognition, protection even, for regional identities. Like the Ardennes dialects, Walloon traditions, they became part of the new Belgian state's fabric. Now, the Industrial Revolution itself mostly passed Derby's historic center by.
Right.
But it did benefit indirectly from new rail lines, highways nearby, and interestingly, the sources mention city folk, elites from Liège, Brussels, starting to buy places in Derby as guest houses.
Ah, the very beginnings of tourism, maybe.
Looks like it. Early leisure travel.
Yeah.
You also see social development, like the Ursuline convent opening a girls' school in 1852. Public works continued too, restoring the Hospice Saint-Jean, building that distinctive Art Nouveau town hall around 1880.
So even without factories, it was adapting, improving life, and quietly laying groundwork for tourism.
Exactly. Guidebooks started mentioning Derby. Then the World Wars. The sources say it was mostly spared destruction, unlike some industrial areas. Served as a rear area billet in World War I, then a haven for refugees and a resistance base in World War II.
Managed to get through relatively unscathed.
Physically, yes. Post-war, investment shifted to modern stuff. Electricity finally arrived in 1952, a public library in 58. This whole period really cemented its identity as a place proud of its heritage, reviving traditional crafts, local festivals like the Saint-Donat Fête.
Which brings us pretty much up to today. And the sources, especially that tourist guide you sent, they make it crystal clear. Tourism is absolutely central now. What's the experience like visiting today, based on that guide?
Yeah, the sources describe a huge transformation, especially after the war. From this quiet little town to a really bustling tourist spot. The guide paints a very appealing picture, this blend of medieval charm, the natural beauty of the Ardennes, and modern comforts for visitors.
That fairy tale feel it mentions.
Exactly. Cobblestone streets, old stone houses, the Arthur River winding through. It creates that atmosphere.
And easy to get around as a tourist. What does the guide say?
It says it's actually exceptionally well organized. Clear information points, brochures in different languages. The locals are apparently friendly, helpful, speaking French, Dutch, often English. Signs are clear.
Good.
And crucially, the sources really emphasize this commitment to keeping it authentic. No flashy chain stores, no generic hotels. It's all local places maintaining that historic character.
Okay, so if you're just wandering the historic core, what are the sort of must-do things according to the guide?
Well, the guide suggests just taking your time, really soaking in the architecture, lots of little artisan shops, handmade chocolates, local liqueurs, woodcrafts, preserves, that kind of thing.
Local specialties.
Definitely. Key landmarks mentioned are the St. Nicholas Church, which is 17th century, and this really striking geological feature right in town, the anticlinal rock.
The folded rock.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Layers of rock just dramatically folded over millennia. The guide also recommends climbing up near the castle. There's a panoramic terrace with fantastic views over the town and the river.
Nice. And food. The guide mentioned a culinary reputation. even for such a small place.
It really does. Describes a whole range of options right in the historic center. From like recognized fine dining spots down to cozy bistros and cafes. It gives some price ideas too.
Oh yeah.
Like a typical 2-course meal might be around 25-40 euro. Fine dining could push towards 100. Lighter stuff, snacks, maybe 5 euro. And it also mentions open air markets for fresh local produce.
Sounds like plenty to see and taste just in the old town. But the sources suggest there's more nearby, right? Beyond the cobblestones. What about different activities?
Oh yeah, the material you sent really shows the variety. For adventure types, there's Adventure Valley Durbuy. The guide describes it as like one of Belgium's biggest outdoor activity parks.
What kind of stuff?
Everything from zip lines and climbing walls to kayaking on the that's seasonal though, May to September mainly, and indoor options too. Day passes are around 25 euro, kayak rentals maybe 20 euro, 25. It's a big draw, especially for families.
Okay, and you mentioned the food scene, but is there more to it than just restaurants?
Definitely. The focus is heavily on local Ardennes ingredients. Think Ardennes ham, local game, mushrooms, herb cheese, river trout.
Classic stuff.
Right. And the sources mention things like food tours, cooking classes, usually between 30 euro, 80 euro. Lots of places do set menus, good value, maybe 35 euros. Derby Jam is highlighted as iconic. And nearby breweries offer tours, tastings of Trappist-style beers.
Sounds delicious.
And the guide describes the atmosphere in the local taverns as really cozy, embodying this culture of like slow, mindful eating.
A place to slow down, definitely.
Yeah.
What if you're looking for relaxation? Nature.
The sources really lean into that wellness and nature angle. The whole Ardennes setting is perfect for it. Outdoor yoga, retreats. There are spa packages from maybe 50 euro up to over 150, often using local natural stuff. Wellness retreats combining mindfulness with guided hikes are mentioned too, maybe 200 euro, 600 euro for a weekend. The sources stress the environment itself is key. The sound of the river, the smell of the forests, the quiet trails.
Just being there is part of it.
Exactly. Lots of free, well-marked walking routes. Or you can do guided nature walks for about 15-25.
So really, depending on what you want, adrenaline, great food, or just peace and quiet, Derby seems to offer it. Okay, for someone actually planning a trip, what practical tips do the sources give?
The tourist guide has some very handy practical info. Transport, for instance, Derby Town, no train station. The nearest are Barvaux or Beaumont. Then you need a bus or taxi.
Good to know.
Renting a car is probably best if you want to explore the wider Ardennes region. Parking is usually in lots just outside the pedestrian bit.
Right, leave the car and walk. Which brings us to
Footwear. The guide strongly advises good shoes because of those charming but definitely uneven cobblestones.
Knew it. Okay, what else? Language. Money.
Language. French is main, but the guide says Dutch and English are widely understood in tourist spots. Money. Credit cards are generally fine, but maybe have some cash for smaller shops or market stalls.
Standard stuff.
Yeah. The local tourist office is highlighted as a great resource. Check the official Derby website mentioned in the sources for events, festivals. Free Wi-Fi seems pretty common in tourist places, and health clinics and hospitals are nearby if needed.
And timing. Does the time of year make a big difference, according to the guide?
Oh, hugely. Seasonality really shapes the experience. Spring, like April to June, great for nature, wildflowers, hiking, outdoor markets pop up, prices are usually mid-range.
Sounds lovely.
Summer, July, August, that's peak season. Busiest, most expensive accommodation could be 20-30% higher. Adventure Valley's buzzing, festivals like the Medieval Fair happen, great for families, but expect crowds.
Okay, peak summer.
Autumn, September to early November. Stunning fall colors, still good for hiking. Prices drop a bit. Focus shifts to that hearty seasonal food.
Cozy season starting.
Exactly. And then winter, late November to February. It's described as having this magical calm. Christmas markets, cozy pubs, maybe snow. Best for romance or spa breaks. Some outdoor stuff scales back though.
That breakdown really helps. You can definitely tailor your trip.
Now, what about families? Bringing kids? Is Derby a good fit based on these sources?
Oh, absolutely. The sources really paint it as very family-friendly, engaging for kids. In the town itself, there are things like treasure hunts, interactive bits to make exploring fun, the topiary park that's specifically mentioned.
With the sculpted bushes.
Yeah, amazing animal shapes. Kids apparently love it. Entry's pretty reasonable, like €5.07.
And Adventure Valley must be a big hit with kids too. Definitely. The sources say it's designed with kids in mind, safety measures, activities for different ages, balancing fun and exercise, especially for that, say, 6 to 12 range. They mention family passes, maybe 120 euro for a family of 4 for the day.
Seems reasonable for a full-day park.
Yeah. And practical stuff too. Restaurants usually have kids menus, high chairs, the guide notes clean, accessible bathrooms. Family accommodation options exist, bigger rooms, apartments, even farm stays with play areas sometimes. You can rent child seats, smaller bikes too.
Sounds like they've really considered families.
It seems so. The sources even mention things like free or cheaper entry for under 12s at museums, special family trail maps from the tourist office, and importantly for parents, reliable emergency services are available.
Okay, so bringing it all together, the history we talked about, this modern tourist experience from the guide, what makes Durbui's story resonate? What's the legacy here, according to the sources?
Well, the sources really present Durbuy as occupying this unique niche today. It manages to embody both its medieval past and this modern reinvention. It's shown as a steward of its heritage, almost like a little lab for sustainable rural development, and just a perfect snapshot of the Ardennes beauty, all rolled into one experience.
It's pretty amazing how it's kept that identity through so much change.
That's exactly it. The historical sources really underscore its incredible lifespan, its ability to adapt, to survive centuries of conflict, economic shifts, political changes. They frame it as this broader story of resilience.
Yeah.
Its old strategic role on the river has kind of morphed into this modern strategic role as a key tourist spot, balancing growth with protecting its history and environment. And the sources even mention recent archaeology finding signs of people living there for maybe 2 millennia.
Wow, even deeper roots.
Adds another layer, doesn't it?
So this deep dive, based entirely on the sources you provided, has really taken us on quite the journey. From Durbuy, way back in 814 AD, getting that unique, smallest city charter in 1331, navigating all those centuries of change, wars, empires, economies, right up to its transformation into this vibrant, modern place that somehow balances history, nature, adventure, food, and wellness.
And I think what its story, as told through these sources, really shows us is the enduring value of small places. Places that find ways to adapt, to change with the world, but fiercely hold on to their core identity.
Fascinating look. Thanks for taking us through this deep dive into Durbuy.
You know, this raises an important question, doesn't it? In a world that's changing so fast, so much information overload, what can we learn from places like Durbuy? About resilience, about identity, about finding value in the small, the deeply rooted things.
That's a compelling thought to leave us with. If you are curious to explore Durbuy's story further, the sources we use certainly offer a wealth of detail.